Hi,
Hello,
I'm Julian.
and I am Tom.
We are Team Binge. We are here to talk about the Lowdown. Tom, we made it to another finale, you and
We did
I.
it. Mission accomplished.
And I watched this finale, Tom. We have not entered into each other's thoughts on this particular episode. I will open the floor up by taking the floor and saying I don't know what I was expecting out of this finale, but it felt like we tied this bow very nicely in terms of everyone got what they deserved, and they didn't really leave me with any regret or mystery, or it was just tied up so nicely. And I don't want to say it was unsatisfying, but it just felt very vanilla, I guess, if that makes sense. And so now I will give the floor to you.
No, I hear that. I feel like there was like one point through this finale where they made comment of like the land being owned by somebody else. I think it was like Chuddo's comment, and I was like, oh, who is this going to be owned by? Is there some like more big mystery to reveal there? But it didn't seem like that went anywhere, and really everything that we had kind of talked about or thought in terms of like not being Dale's not being a suicide and it being a murder or kind of cover up, it all kind of played out in fruition here, and they did do a great job of really buttoning up everybody's story. I would almost argue the end of the episode almost seemed a little like Lord of the Ringsy to me, where it kept ending and ending and ending, and they kept like trying to tie every little thing together. And I think the only thing we had talked about before we started recording was the odd like end credits sequence where you have Betty Joe singing karaoke. Sadly, that was kind of weird. But again, overall, I enjoyed the series. Very well written, some really good speeches and dialogue throughout this episode, and I had a good time.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed the series as well. I'd be interested to know if they're going to get renewed for season two. But in the way that they tied all this up, it's perfectly fine as like a standalone season, which is
Agreed.
something we don't often get. And maybe that's where my like every show is like we want a second season, so we'll do a cliffhanger or we'll add to the mystery. This one they tied it up so well that the show could end here, or they could travel into a different investigation and different mystery in a season two. But yeah, to your point, there wasn't part where they were like, hey, there's a deeper mystery, and it turns out there's not a deeper mystery. And I didn't feel like it was a Lord of the Rings ending. What I did feel like is they kind of tied everything up about mid-episode, and then it was like, wait, what are we still hanging around for? And they were like,
Right.
well, we're contractually obligated to make an hour-long show, so we're going to make an hour-long show. And Gene Triplehorn loves to sing karaoke and cry, so we're going to give you that for a little while. Also, they were like, he could drive the van to the end of this episode, or we could have it break down one more time and just let him walk, and that'll give us another 10 minutes. So these aren't complaints. I enjoyed this, but it just was a little bit different than what I was expecting, I guess, from a mystery show. And that's probably because they don't know if they're getting a second season. But
Yeah, agreed. Like they had that one little conversation in the bar, which we'll get to, of like Lee and Marty kind of talking about like, Marty can write a book about all his PI stories, and then tell him he should do long form versus short form. Like that could be interesting, and I'm glad, as we kind of talked about when we got introduced with Marty as a character, I'm glad it ended with him and Lee kind of becoming chums and being on the same side.
sure. We open with this scene of Dale and Lee talking in the bookstore. This was not a vision, right? This was a memory, so they had met before.
I mean, yeah, like later on, says he did not meet Dale, so maybe it is, but I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't believe this actually happened.
Right. This felt like a memory as opposed to something he made
Agreed.
up. And it all goes back to the Jim Thompson novels and Dale being like, there's only one plot. Things are not as they seem, but I would argue things were just as they seem in this show. Like everything kind of lined out to be. I'll say this, the only twist, and I don't know if the show was trying to point this out, was like whether or not Donald Washburn was in on it all and was like truly evil. And this episode, they were like, whoa, pump the brakes, guys. He was just like, He unfortunately was talking with some bad people, but deep down he's a good guy. And like, I don't know that was the central mystery for me. I will say that I conjectured that early on, that Donald was just like a nice guy. But I would argue there were some choices he made during the show that I don't know, like why the threatening gazebo meeting? I don't know. So the only thing this episode really brought back was like, hey, if you thought Donald was just a confused politician, but his heart was in the right place, guess what? You were right. You know.
Well, like exactly to your point. Like they tried to paint him as a villain mid-season, and he did some very villainous things with the gazebo scene, with his like threatening demeanor towards Betty Jo, which obviously they've got a backstory, and we realized that Betty Jo was maybe more of the mastermind to a lot of this that kind of went down. But yeah, I don't think he's necessarily innocent in it, and making him like more sympathetic at the end I think was cool, but maybe they went a little bit too hard throughout trying to play him as the villain.
Sure. I don't know if cool is the right term, but yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
We ended last episode with Lee busting into a white supremacist church and holding a gun and waving it at everyone. And to our point, and I think we touched on this, like they got him out of that situation, a situation where he most certainly would have been shot almost immediately. He is then saved by Marty coming in, claiming to be a federal agent, and like it leads to some comedy certainly because Marty then gets hit. But I did appreciate they were like, cliffhanger in the Pentultimate, we'll get him out of it right away and we'll just get back to what we do best, Marty and Lee traveling around in an old white van.
Yeah, like Marty storming in and like holding up like seemingly his wallet and saying he's a federal agent. And the guy's like, no, he's not. He's just like a patsy for Donald. He's like, I'm undercover. Like it was just great. I loved him coming in and helping out.
I will always appreciate the trope where like the tough strong arm guy is then wounded and he's immediately like, I'm dying, like over the top, and you have Lee being like, calm down, man. It was just
stop bleeding.
And then the back and forth where he's like, it's just a graze. And then I guess Lee then making too much of it, and he's like, "I saved you," and then Marty being like, it was just a graze." Like I loved them like going back and forth on that. That was very funny.
Agreed. Yeah, great banter, and like, I mean, those dudes like come out again, like you talked about throughout the whole series. A lot of poor gun ownership and management here, with these dudes just coming out in these ARs, and they are firing away at these guys that just happen to like come into their church. It seemed wild that they would be indiscriminately firing on them.
Sure. Now this van motor doesn't run very well, but the back and side is, I guess, apparently bulletproof.
Yeah.
This leads to them doing the other trope, which is they go to a veterinarian instead of a real doctor, and he gets some special lady cow medicine, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, the way he like words it's like, yeah, bovine vagina muscle relaxer, and then when eventually Marty like reads the label, he's like, Lee's, I didn't want you to see that. Like it was just so funny and out like completely out of nowhere, but it was a great little bit of comedy.
Yeah, Marty gets to act like he's high as a kite, tripping like a cow. That was all great.
Ooh.
They all make it out of there alive, though, which is okay. We're back at the bookstore, and this is where Chutto confronts Lee about getting his grandfather killed and how upset he is, and understand the emotional stakes here. This is cut with the brick that's thrown through his window, and this then becomes a point for Lee of how expensive that window is going to be, which windows are not cheap, Tom. I can tell you that.
No. Yeah, I've seen you break quite a few. But yeah, to your point, this is where they kind of had that scene we talked about in the beginning of Chutto saying like, who this land belonged to, or to belong to somebody else beforehand, like made it seem like there was going to be another twist, and I don't think we got anything. But I was glad like Chutto kind of came back and like confronted Lee about this, and you can see Lee is like devastated in this moment because he's realizing that his actions, even though they weren't indirectly caused his grandfather to die, and Arthur Williams. So I appreciate the scene. I thought it did a good job of kind of adding more emotional weight to Arthur's passing.
Right, and then it plays into Lee and Donald's conversation later in the episode where they're like, we both got people hurt or killed, that sort of thing. I did appreciate the showism where during the Lee and Marty conversation, Lee's like, I'm pretty sure I saw Trip in the church, and we were like, does he even know who Trip is? I don't know. There was like such a showism here, and the other one's like, oh, the philanthropist, and I don't know. There was it just seems so clumsy in this moment that all of a sudden they would bring up Trip in the church during this wild waving gun moment. I don't know. I just this felt very much like a showism.
Well, they didn't really tell us who Trip was. Like, we assumed he was, like, part of the guy, like, pulling the string, especially for Frank. But, like, for them to just recognize him as a philanthropist, and maybe we missed that earlier on in the season. But I like how they did call out, like, he's a philanthropist. Like, you didn't think you'd see him in a room full of Nazis. And he's like, well, you could see him anywhere.
Right. While they're discussing the window and what's to become of the window, I don't feel like they gave our security guard friend enough to do in this show. He just kind of comes in for like comedic moments once every 2.5 episodes, and I don't know. I find him funny, but maybe too much of a good thing is a bad thing. Tom, I don't know.
I think so. Like Beard in Ted Lasso, when they gave him his own episode, it was too much. He's a side character.
That's fair. He's the Beard of the Lowdown. Tom, as all finales should, we go to a poetry reading where Frances reads a on-the-nose poem about her parents getting divorced and separated. Very beautiful. I like that they tie this to, Lee's a writer. His daughter has picked up some of that talent. Lovely moment. I don't know, do we have time to sit down for poetry readings in the middle of people being murdered? I don't know. Seemed like a lot.
I mean, this is post all the murder, so he's like waiting to see what happens with Frank and everything else. But yeah, it was very on the nose of like the absence is abrupt and it'll always be there. Like talking about like the tree that gets planted. I liked it. I think like in Frances's delivery, that actress has been phenomenal all season and continues to drive a lot of the emotional weight for Lee. So great scene, well done. But yeah, it did seem a little bit kind of ish out of place because the only thing we've really seen Frances is like with that parent-teacher conference from last scene, and then she just kind of comes to hang out with Lee every once in a while. But this seemed to be some scheduled event that we didn't really hear anything about prior.
Sure. I did appreciate how like Lee is like, oh, it was beautiful because it was true, and he's like complimenting her, and then he just like abruptly walks off. I don't know. There was Lee takes some weird moments to leave his daughter. Like it feels like there's more to be said, more to be, but I guess we've kind of understand his parenting style at this point.
It's a dentist's job at this point.
Exactly. Whatever his name is, normal dentist guy who seems to be a lovely individual. We then have a call from Marty where it's like, hey, Frank's not going to get charged. It's going to be self-defense for Arthur's murder. And you're like, got it. Like, okay, so classic. Frank's going to... But... Hey, listen, and I don't want to say anything. They didn't show us that scene. We truly have no idea. He was obviously there for, like, poor reasons in order to steal the will from an old man who wasn't quite there. But the old man then took a gun out of a drawer and, like, they, I don't know, in a showism, cut away. So, I mean, if you put yourself in Frank's situation, granted, he barged in, he pushed Arthur over, it's more complicated. But he does continue to talk to himself and be like, the old man came at me. I stood my ground. So, like, I understand he's not a great person, but I don't think the show did a very good job of, like, showing us that, yeah, Frank definitely murdered Arthur. Like, I don't know. There's some...
Well, I think it's like some of the murders that we've seen in this with both Dale and with Arthur. Like, you could argue they were accidental. Like, obviously were put in situations where they shouldn't have been, but both of these main deaths were kind of accidental.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is, did Arthur deserve it? Probably. That's where I come out to. Is Frank an okay guy, Tom? Probably. I don't know. We don't know.
We'll find out in season 2.
If he murdered someone, we know our friend Tim is all on board. Tim's a huge fan of murder, So, Tim, thanks for your emails, by the way. We've been visiting them. Okay. So Lee gives, I guess in this moment, once again, we were like wrapping up the episode mid-episode. So all of the letters that Lee acquired of Dale's, he sends to Pearl, which leads Pearl to call Betty Joe. And I'm assuming this reveals to Pearl who her real dad is, and also just kind of what went down, because this then leads to Betty Jo, who Lee is trying to get a hold of. This then forces her to meet with Lee, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was all just seemingly showism stuff of like Lee's like, I need to talk to Betty Jo. What can I do to make this happen? I don't remember if the letters had anything to say specific about like Dale's parentage or lack thereof with Pearl, but like Betty Jo seems to, I mean, she's just freaking out in this moment because she doesn't know potentially what's in them, what has been said, and is trying to protect the relationship with Pearl, which we already know is a pretty fraught relationship.
Right. They have a good conversation, Lee and Betty Jo, in terms of like, hey, if you do a good thing or you're trying to do a good thing and it ends badly, like, does that change the definition of whether or not it's good? Mm-hmm. And so, and quite a bit of this show is like accidental or people just wrong place, wrong time, accidental premeditated murder, as we like to call it, Tom. And so and Betty Jo is pointing out that I guess, and is this where it's all explained? She's like, they were just supposed to scare him, and I unlocked a door to let them in, but in the end, they shot him, and then they...
I don't think, like, Lee played... He put the audience when he's talking to Dale later. All she kind of says was, like, it was an accident, all I did was unlock a door. And I guess, like, that was enough for Lee to draw all these other inferences to then deliver us the more full picture with Donald later.
Sure. I appreciate Lee just quoting the billboard he drove by, which the show like very prominently is like, hey, this is going to come into play.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather be a poor man than a liar.
I'd rather be a poor. So what's your thought on that? Would you rather be a poor man and a liar, or would you rather be a rich man and a tattle?
To quote the Wolf of Wall Street, I have been a poor man and I have been a rich man, and I will choose money every time. I don't care how the money comes, Tom. I really don't care.
So you're in the Betty Jo camp.
Pro murder, pro rich. That's what we've come out of this show. My official stance. Me and Tim. Tom, I've got questions, and it is regarding. So the letters Lee sent to Pearl. Pearl then informed Betty Jo that she has all these letters. Betty Jo is now upset, and she's like asking Lee what's in the letters. And she, I think, offers to pay him to say they're fake. But what is she worried about that's in the letters? Like, does it have to do with the land? Does it have to do with how terrible she is? What is she...
I mean, I'm assuming due to the manipulating of a crime scene after he was killed, and she kind of makes it fake suicide, like she thinks there might be something in there that may be incriminating to her. Like, I don't know if it's as much about the Pearl-Donald relationship as much as it is her trying to cover her own butt.
Okay. Yeah, I was confused by this, and all of this leads to this lovely security team at this Italian or Spanish villa that's in the middle of Tulsa, taking Lee away, and I appreciate the janitor that shows up in this moment, and then he comes back at the end. Yeah, all very good. Funny. We get some cork board. We're reminded that there's a cork board and that there's a real mystery here. And Lee is back in the diner, and he's getting a pep talk from Emily about, she loves how that he's sticking it to the man. And so you have kind of this conflicting, like, you've got people that love what Lee does, and then you have people that are like, Lee is endangering others constantly, and he should just like quit. But these are the angel and the devil on both of his shoulders as he decides whether or not to stick it around as a true historian.
Yeah, and I feel like this was good, and he kind of needed this encouragement in this moment to be able to kind of figure out what to do next based off this conversation he had with Betty Jo. So, like, and Emily seems to be, I don't even know if I realized this, but that diner is on, like, the end of that street that they're, like, his business and those other businesses are on. I don't think I noticed that till the final scene. But yeah, like, he has a close relationship with these people, and she's been kind of a voice of reason all season. So to have her kind of come in and say, like, hey, Tulsa needs people like you, I liked it.
Sure. We cut from there to Marty is driving Donald around, loses his security, takes him over to the Tulsa Beat Barbecue. There's a song that plays, and if you're wearing or listening with subtitles, or watching with subtitles, I should say, There's a plethora of the N-word used, which we're a podcast for children, so we'll move right on by, but it hits you like a ton of bricks. And this mirrors, like, them bringing Donald into this barbecue mirrors how Donald brought Lee to his police barbecue, which I thought was a funny parallel.
Yeah, I don't think I even put that together until I read the outline and you added that of Lee being like dragged through this party that Donald was throwing, of everybody like flipping him off or pushing him and everything, and now you have Donald just barbecue and kind of getting not like the same level of vitriol that like people were giving to Lee, but he's just totally a fish out of water here, and like feels like Barty like betrayed him by taking him here without like letting him know. But then at the end, and like Cyrus like asked the question, "Hey man, if you can pass Prop 50, we'll all be on board," kind of a deal. And he's like, "Oh yeah, education." It's like, just take a minute to talk to people. Like,
right.
You probably have a lot more in common.
Right. Yeah, the parallel only came to me where I think towards the end, Lee was like, "Hey, make sure you get a hot dog," which is how Donald finished their conversation.
Hot dog. I forgot about that. How brilliant. And there was like hot dogs on the desk throughout that whole scene when Lee and Donald are talking too. That is so good. Good catch.
Yeah. So Lee, in talking to Donald, gives him the opportunity to read his article, and essentially, Lee summarizes it for him and lays out, like, hey, you had an argument about the Indian Head Hills. This led to Betty Jo and Frank, hiring some guys, getting Alan, who then outsourced to scare Dale, leading to Blackie and his buddy messing it up and accidentally killing Dale, and then Betty Jo having it make like suicide. And
we had kind of clocked this, I think, early on, where like him being kind of shot in the side of the head, like it wasn't conducive to like this scene. So I think they did a good job of kind of like, and again, I think as you start this show, you kind of assume it's not necessarily a suicide and there's something else kind of going on. He wouldn't be reviewing this whole case if it was. But I like how they kind of brought that back and kind of confirmed for the audience that, there was some shenanigans going on.
Sure. Now, this took me back when I believe Lee is talking with Betty Jo about this, and she says, like, there's a night where two guys, like, snuck up and Dale shot at them. They went back. So ultimately, all of that is a lie. That is her just trying to cover, because the timeline of that did not make sense. So I guess I'm realizing, like, how the lies had to stack up for Betty Jo in order to cover her tracks. We find out that like Donald doesn't know about any of this, that he did care for his brother, that land deal with Tripp and the 46 was, simply he was being told like, hey, these guys are powerful, and this is how you get them on your side. Lee points out, like, hey, this looks an awful lot like a bribe.
Right, exactly. And I like that, like, this whole sequence of, like, Lee being just very confident in portraying the events of everything that's kind of happened, I thought was just really well done from an acting perspective, and, like, the back and forth that they had, and, like, Donald truly, I think Lee makes eye contact with him at one point. He's like, hey, man, you really didn't know, did you? And then kind of seeing some of that sympathy from Donald's perspective. I really like the scene.
Yeah, this is the moment in all of the detective noir where you get to sit down with either the suspect or someone important and explain, lay out all the pieces. And I thought it was well done. I just none of it came as, like, typically there's a surprise in here. Like if this is an Agatha Christie novel, like in this moment you're like, oh, but with this one it was all kind of like, okay, at this point we kind of figured it, I guess.
Yeah, like you said at the beginning, the big reveal here is that Donald didn't know, less so about like all the murder mystery bit of it, because I think we knew quite a bit of it. But the fact that like Donald didn't know, when he seems remorseful, and he even comments like, hey, Dale would have hated all this death and this chaos, because he was like, as we get to a little bit later, like a gentle or a kind or a sensitive man that would have hated all this.
Sure. This leads to ultimately Lee coming up with a deal with Donald, I guess, and, based on what he wrote and what all that's happened. they make a deal to kind of like work together, and I guess he's gonna like help Donald out in terms of making this not look like a bribe.
Well, I don't know, I think it comes up here in a second where like Donald then essentially gives the land back, but I loved how they played this where like, Donald, hey, I'll give you a choice. Like, I can release this article that talked about the murders of Dale Washburn, or I can rewrite this and tell the story about like your brother and the kind of man he was and what he did with the community or other things like that. Like, it was very cool the way they kind of twisted it around and made it more about a celebration of Dale's life rather than the chaos that surrounded his death.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was a lovely another bow tied to make this package very pretty. We see Donald honoring Dale's wish, or last wish, and giving the land back to the Osage Nation, and then a promise of, hey, when I'm elected, we'll continue to have strong relations between state and tribal. And he also stands up to that idiot Trip, he gives him the old what for.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if, the hope is that he just, he puts him down and like going to be the governor and he doesn't have to worry about this guy. But Trip doesn't seem like a guy that's just going to like lay down and just go away. Like, would there be consequences for Donald? Who knows, maybe. But I guess it's kind of up to the audience to decide. Because I'm assuming even if they do a second season, it probably wouldn't follow the same story thread.
Right. I think it would be a completely different mystery. And they'd do a quick, like, in the opening season where, like, Donald is impeached because of some, like, silly thing. Anyways, we get a sense of Lee's article about Dale's life. And to your point, it's very much about, like, how he valued freedom and truth. And they even say Dale is the sensitive kind, which is the name of this episode, Tom.
It is. Very well done. But yeah, saying like he was about personal expression and how the choices that we make in life matters. Like again, a really good like show finale kind of bit where you've got the article being written and then it's kind of overlaying with a lot of the different things about Dale and where the characters are kind of moving throughout this process. It was very well delivered.
Sure. Then we find out that Donald wins the election. Huzzah. I know we all would have voted for him. This is intercut with all the One Well people getting arrested. Maybe I blinked, but like, why did all of the one... I know we all wanted them arrested. We all wanted them like lined up on a wall and shot. But why were they arrested? They explain?
I mean, they did dabble in some murder, right? Like, we saw the dude with Mark.
But who hasn't, Tom?
The
who hasn't dabbled in murder,
They did do a little tar and feathering, so maybe that guy kind of said some stuff to get them arrested. They also probably have a lot of illegal firearms that they seem to indiscriminately shoot at a van.
No such thing.
I think there's some reasons.
No such thing as illegal firearms in Oklahoma. I want that on the record. Tar and feathering, that's like community service, Tom. You don't go to jail for tar and feathering. Come on.
I would disagree with that one. I mean, I would argue that Mark's probably excited. He had like a smile on his face as he was getting taken away. So, as he said earlier, he probably wants to go back to jail where he
this was all... The great mystery of this whole thing was that Pastor Mark wanted to go back to jail so that he could live amongst his own people. So he was like, I can't wait. You run to jail, like you're excited about it. Like, I don't know. I guess the only thing I could think of is that they did bury some bodies on the property. So if, like, I guess Marty knew about the bodies, right? Maybe? No? They were digging the bodies. Did they show them to Marty? No, they showed them to Donald. So Donald's seen the bodies.
Yeah. Or Frank. I think it was just Frank. I don't think Donald did. I think Donald got out of there. Either way, we know they're bad people. Got arrested. I'm okay with that.
Sure. I don't know. I'm in a pretty forgiving mood, Tom, so I don't know. Speaking of someone who's not in a forgiving mood, Blackie's mom shoots Frank. Finds out that he had Alan, ultimately set Blackie up, and then that led to Blackie's death. So he got shot in the neck in his car, too. What an incredible parallel to Alan's death as well as his.
Yeah, it was kind of brutal. Like, I mean,
right when you saw her
outside the car door, I was like, oh man, yeah, she's going to probably take some vengeance here. And I don't know, like, we certainly all probably as an audience wanted to see Frank get his comeuppance, but this seemed like almost too much to me. And I felt bad for the mom character here, like having to feel like this is what she has to resort to.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird because, like, Frank, while involved, you could argue he murdered Arthur in a certain way. But, like, on the Allen side and the Blackie side, I don't know that he, like, had a deep handle on that. And so just to get murdered in his car, I don't know. Once again, this felt like the show being like, hey, we didn't like that guy. He's dead. We didn't like these guys. They're going to jail. We didn't like this guy. He's dead. Like, I don't know. It was just, once again, they were like, hey, we want you to feel good about all the bad people getting their comeuppance and all the good people, like, having a beautiful wedding and everyone's super happy about Samantha and the dentist getting married.
Yeah. And this dentist seems to have, a very solid practice. Like, is this actually Crentist? Like, this wedding, as Ray even points out when we see Ray again, which was so great to see him, like, this must have cost a pretty penny.
Yeah. Well, this guy's the first of all dentists. This is number one Crentist dentist.
Head dentist, okay.
And I skipped over it a little bit, but there is a quick scene of them in the diner discussing, like, their adventures, and Marty and Lee, and, like, writing a book, and Marty's telling his detective stories, and there's, like, a hint at, like, hey, maybe not, like, one long book, but, like, individual cases, which is almost like, hey, FX, if you'd like to give us a second season, we could do different cases, that sort of thing.
I thought the same thing. Yeah, it was almost like you could parallel it to a movie. Instead of doing a movie, let's do a TV show with multiple seasons, yeah.
Right. The, everyone in the wedding party has read Lee's article, and they're all, like, it's like, once again, and Lee's like, everyone's complimenting Lee, which is exactly what he wants. And he ends up giving them a Joe Brainerd painting, which I believe is stolen. But once again, it's stolen from bad people, so that's something.
It's okay. But yeah, like, as he's walking this present through the wedding to hand it to them, you have that one, like, waitress that kind of comes by and says, "You want caviar?" And he's like, no. At first I was like, oh, that's kind of a weird thing. But then the fact that he declines it goes back to the callback of the previous episode where the dudes are making, like, the beluga caviar. I thought that was a funny little tie-in.
Didn't even catch it. That's hilarious. But once again, Crentist the dentist, he spares no expense. He's like an old guy that builds a Jurassic Park, you know? He spares no expense. Lee talks to Francis, and he's like, hey, this is a good thing. I've accepted it. You need a stable environment. Like, I'm a liability. You should stay with Johnny and your mom full time. And then, once again, this is just the emotional stakes of father-daughter, like, relationships. And she argues about, like, why it's good for her to have him in her life.
Yeah, because as she's called out multiple times, like, he's a good person, and, like, you should, like, the fact that I can call you out as a good person, like, yeah, we're both good people trying to do our best, and, like, she can see that in him. I appreciated the kind of button that they put in this relationship, because even after all of this, Lee is still trying to push his daughter away, but his daughter's not having it. Sure.
And I would argue once the janitor, like, is like, hey, is that guy bothering you? Which is a callback to Betty Jo and Lee at the same place. That the episode should have just ended. Instead, Lee's driving along, or Lee tries to go to the van and it won't start. So he ends up doing a slow-mo walk through, like, Tulsa. And I was like, why are we still... I thought, maybe... I honestly was like, okay, here's where it's going to happen. Like, at the end of the episode, it's going to be like, hey, it's not all, like, tied in a bow. Like, someone was lying, or something's different, or they were going to... But, no, we never got that.
Listen, just watching him slowly walk down the street and vape, I think I'm going to start vaping.
I think you should, Tom.
This sold me.
I think you should start vaping. I think kids should start vaping. I think old people should start vaping. Very pro-vape. Very pro. Getting that money any way you can. Pro-murder and pro-vape. That's where that's what the Lowdown has taught me. I just... Once again, for such a strong show that started off so well and, like, I've enjoyed, it just felt like the finale... Like, they didn't have enough, and they tied it up so neatly that they could have, shaved 15 or 20 minutes somewhere.
Yeah, the walk back to this like street where we had all these like side characters that just had really quick little one-liners or whatever, and then them kind of just going back to their lives. Like I like the idea of it because it just kind of says like there's this big event that kind of happens. Lee does all this, he writes the article, and then at the end of the day, they're just going back to living their lives and owning a diner, owning a record store, owning a bookstore, being a lawyer, like that cool little street of people. But yeah, it did seem to drag on a little bit for me, and that's where I kind of mentioned in the beginning. It felt like there was a couple different endings throughout this episode that made it feel like a Lord of the Rings kind of style deal. But I'm not dogging on it. I still think it was done really well, but maybe there were some pieces that could have streamlined a bit.
Sure.
I feel like the biggest thing that took me out was like this end credit sequence with Betty Jo, because like they tied everybody's story up into a bow except for Betty Jo. And like we said, if you haven't watched it, it's easy to just, hey, credits start rolling. You see Sterling Harjo directed the episode, and then we just turned it off. And then go back to it a couple minutes later and realize, oh, there's this tag with Betty Jo going back to, I think, the same bar, right? Like the Black, something like that, and or Jack of Clubs, singing the song. She's got her like rodeo queen outfit on, which was a callback to the conversation that she had with Lee back then. Like sad, crying, singing. It was just weird. And again, I like the idea of showing where she's at, or showing us as an audience where she's at, and seemingly, at the end of her rope, she has nobody close with her, and she's in a tough spot. But I would argue, like, shouldn't she have been arrested? Didn't she, like, stage a suicide or murder and all this? Like, why is she scot-free here?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, she certainly, like, messed with evidence and all that stuff as this murder investigation comes down. I don't know. I guess I thought it was like a parallel of she started as a rodeo queen and like performing, and then she's made so many terrible choices that she's just like back at sad karaoke. I don't know. Like other characters had like arch and redemption. Hers was just kind of like a flat line of now she's just sad at the end. I don't know. I honestly, I wish I would have turned it off and missed this, but unfortunately, I watched it, recorded on a DVR, and skipped through the commercials to this, and it was brutal. Overall, Tom, I enjoyed the Lowdown. If they got a second season, I would continue to watch. There was a lot I liked about it. I thought it was very well done, and it does make me kind of want to look into what else Sterling has done. Just to explore it, like Reservoir Dogs and that type of thing. So glad we watched it. Tom, final thoughts?
I'm with you, man. I had a fun time with this one. Like, I think this is a show that I don't know if I don't know if it's got like sticking power. Like if I'm going to go back and like want to rewatch or kind of revisit some of the characters, but because I think everything was delivered very well, acted well, written well. Certainly like cinematography and direction I thought was really good, but I think it's kind of one of these kind of like one and done stories that I don't know if I need more with the characters. I thought what they did was great, and I'm okay with just kind of being a standalone season. But
sure,
again, fun show. I use the word fun sometimes probably when I shouldn't, because there's a lot of
loved it
and vitriol.
So happy and fun, you said.
Yeah. But a good mix of like comedy and like serious stuff that unfortunately still goes on in present day Tulsa, and told by somebody from the area. I thought was great, and it's good to get a little sneak peek.
Sure, yeah, I'd be interested if a second season dropped, if I could stream this in like 2 or 3 nights, watching multiple episodes without commercials, and when I didn't have to take notes. Whether or not I would revisit it. I probably would before a season 2. Even though you hope that it's a completely different mystery. But yeah, I'd encourage people to watch it. If you've gotten to this part of the podcast and you haven't watched The Lowdown, then definitely go back and watch it. For those of you that are listening, you can reach out to us at teambingepodcast@gmail.com. We are rolling into a new show, which will be on the socials, which Tom runs. So there won't really be a gap between this one and the next one. We appreciate all of you that listen. If you could rate and review, that would be lovely. Tom, what did I miss?
Yes, as Julian mentioned, follow us on the socials at Team Binge or at Team Binge Podcast. And yes, the new show we are going to do, which I am very, very excited about, is Pluribus, the Apple TV show from the writer and creator of Breaking Bad, Vince Gilligan. It's got, I think, Rhea Seehorn. I'm probably saying that wrong, but she kind of leads the show here in some sort of dystopian thing where everybody's happy, but she is not. And if you watch trailers for it, it looks just bonkers and off the wall. And I will watch anything Vince Gilligan does. He's incredible. So if you enjoyed some of our shenanigans on this one, please join us for that. And excited to start the next show.
If she's not happy, she should probably try money, Tom. I think we've decided during the course of the show that money makes people happy. For Team Binge, Tom, I have been Julian.
And Julian, I have been Tom. Till next show, everybody.